Hi, I'm Peter Vincer, CEO of Notorious. Thank you for tuning into Dumpster Fyre, a full account of Fyre Festival, what led up to it, what made it possible, and ultimately what went wrong. Over the course of the next few months, we'll tell as complete a story as we can, from every side, including many people that were involved, a few that had context, and the man responsible for it all, Billy McFarland himself, from prison. And we'll also be bringing a cast of celebrity hosts to help tell different parts of the story. Part 1 is hosted by Jordan Harbinger, one of the most respected journalists and podcasters around. Stay tuned for who will follow. Oh, and one more very important note. Billy McFarland will not be receiving 1 penny of revenue from this project. Every single dollar that he would have earned will go to restitution and victims of fire. Without further ado, Part 1.
This call is from
William McFarland,
an inmate at a federal prison.
Fyre Festival was to the south.
Chaos has erupted.
It really ruined some people.
One up to decline the call or to accept, dial 5 now.
This is Jordan Harbinger from the Jordan Harbinger Show. How you doing?
Jordan, nice to meet you. I'm laying in the bed I made here, Jordan. We've been locked down since March, but more importantly, I want to start by apologizing.
The actual experience exceeds all expectations. That's hard to put in words. It gives people that type of energy, that type of power.
When I think about the mistakes that were made and what happened, there's no way I can just describe it other than, what the fuck was I thinking? I hurt many people, and I'm aware of the pain and suffering that I've caused. What I did was completely wrong and stupid. And not only did I harm people financially, I know that I violated their trust. I let them down, and I'm truly sorry about that. The ramifications of my actions on my family, friends, and people I work with is something I struggle with every day. I was in total disregard of the effects of my actions and the poor and selfish decisions I made on those who believed in me. Moving forward, I'm dedicated to helping those I've hurt. I believe this starts with rebuilding everybody's trust. And to do this, I'll operate with extreme transparency. Creating value and good for those I've hurt and doing it the right way is now my life's mission. And I thank you guys for giving me a chance to have a podcast to take the first steps towards proving what I can do and doing it to help others.
The prepared statement makes sense, right? But, and I'm sure people appreciate the apology, but why should we listen to you right now with this?
So I guess I'll tell you why I'm doing this podcast and what I'm trying to accomplish. A year ago today, I was in the midst of a 3-month stint in solitary confinement. And there's a lot to talk about from that time, but overall, it was definitely the hardest but most impactful period of my life. I think solitary led to this forced reflection of my mistakes and the people I hurt. It was almost like it was this much needed confrontation with reality. So kind of just sitting there, I was stuck on the seriousness of my mistakes. At the same time, I was being exposed to and surrounded by pure suffering. There were a lot of men who were serving years and some even decades lost in a hole. They really had no one to speak with and absolutely nothing going on. So at first, it made me think how fortunate I was, which just made my mistakes that much more stupid and idiotic. But then this kind of gave way to this desperation to wanting to do something to help a lot of these men I was surrounded by. I thought that if I couldn't do something to make one person's day there a little bit better, I'd really be worthless. But at the same time, I was one of them. I was utterly powerless. And I think the culmination of this was the biggest moment for me. I decided to spend the rest of the time in solitary setting a plan to dedicating myself to helping those I really hurt and helping those I let down. And so as I thought about what it meant to be wrong, I also thought about what went right, because I needed something to focus on or build off of if I was going to do any good. So taking a step back, far before the Fyre Festival, far before Magnesis, and even before Spling, I was focused on this idea of connectivity and exposure. I didn't know how to verbalize it. But what I believe I found and what I was after was this concept that connecting and bringing people together who wouldn't otherwise meet just creates a ton of value. In my experience, it was the world's most potent source of ideas, relationships, and good. And I think that if done properly, this can be used to create and share a lot of good. So I'm excited to get into in later episodes what really happened, but I think the podcast is the first step towards developing this theme properly. So I'm doing the podcast to bring different people together and then sharing these connections with anybody who's listening. So I think that if we can do our own little way to recreate this magic through a podcast that comes at almost like the intersection of diverse people and ideas with the listeners, that'd be really cool. So along the way, I'm sure you're going to dive in and I'll, of course, tell my story. But I also want to take steps on the financial side. So 100% of my proceeds of this will, of course, be dedicated towards restitution.
So the proceeds from the podcast are going to go towards restitution. So I'm definitely I'm going to go out of order here because, of course, chronological always works best for what we're doing here. But I want to be clear that what you're saying is that you're going to be doing a podcast, which is it's going to be called Dumpster Fyre, from what I understand. I love the title. Those proceeds are going to go towards the people that were harmed by Fyre Fest, correct?
So I own 50% of the Dumpster Fyre podcast, and my entire stake will be given to restitution.
Got it. Okay. Because $26 million is a lot of money. I mean, most people work their whole lives and never even get close to that. So I know from personal experience, podcasting can be a great living, but it's going to be a stretch to hit $26 million. Do you have other ideas for how you might go about restitution?
I think the first thing I need to do is take responsibility for all of my actions and really train myself to operating properly, following all the rules, and just doing and giving complete transparency. The Fyre Festival was never supposed to be about expensive ticket packages or promises of top food and glamorous accommodations. It really just took a life of its own. It started because it was about this desire I had, really a need to share this little island paradise that I stumbled upon and all the magic that I was finding on this island. And I was just so desperate to share it with as many people as I could. And what people don't know is that the Fyre Festival was really the culmination of dozens of trips, or really many festivals that I ran to these islands in the years before Fyre. It started first with Magnesis, where we took these small old propeller planes and flew them from New York to the small islands of the Exumas, and eventually grew to taking a lot of Fyre Apps talent. And it was during these trips where a childhood friend said, you should totally do a treasure hunt on these islands for Magnesis members, that the real Fyre Festival was spawned. So I'm sure people have seen highlights or videos or clips from the various talent or entertainers or people or Magnesis members who have come to these islands. But what those trips were really about was, what if you bring 12 people, 24 people, 3 dozen people to this one little remote island and have them just spend 3 or 4 days together with adventure and trying to make the inaccessible accessible and just spending time, quality time with people they wouldn't usually spend time with, and seeing what kind of relationships come by way of that. And as this worked on a small scale and as it grew, the idea for the Fyre Festival was to expose thousands of people to this. And along the way, I obviously totally messed up, and more importantly, I hurt a lot of people. So I think before we get to the real dream and vision that I've been putting together, I need to take full responsibility, and I need to take the first steps towards rebuilding trust. And I think it really starts and ends with trust.
What happened with the first island? The story says, as soon as you mentioned Pablo Escobar, the owner pulled it. But that can't be it. What happened?
That is actually true. So we had essentially run, let's say, 24 mini Fyre festivals in the 2 years before Fyre Festival really became Fyre Festival. And these trips started as, 6 Magnesis members and me, up to a couple hundred people. And these trips grew in frequency to every other weekend. And we had been negotiating with certain landowners on Norman's Key to do the festival on their land. And the negotiations were going well. And we released that trailer highlight video and talked about Pablo Escobar, and that ended it. And I was literally on the way down to Norman's Key when I was told I was banned from the island and getting sued from them, blah, blah, blah.
Why should we listen to you now? How do we know that this is not more of what we'd seen before with Fyre Fest. A lot of people think that you're just never going to be done lying.
So I think I'm at a place now where I'm not going to hide behind my mistakes. I'm going to share everything that happened. And I've never really spoken, and now is finally the time. I was completely guilty, and one question that a lot of people, I think, ask me and really want the answer for is, even if the Fyre Festival was the success and everything that I believed, or had hoped is probably a better word, that it was going to be, came true, I'd still be in jail. I was still guilty. And what I did was I lied to my investors and other partners about the status of our company, how much money we had, how much money we were making to get money that I thought we needed for the festival. So regardless, I was wrong. And I hope you dig into me and we can go into exactly what those mistakes were. But through all these mistakes, I think there was some positive takeaways. And that really was this theme that I'd like to harp on now, that when different people connect who wouldn't usually meet, there's a lot of good and value and innovation that happens there. So if I can take this podcast and make it a platform where I bring these different people together and in just some small way create good from those connections and use that to help people I hurt, then I think that's really the first appropriate step I can take. So there's no way around my mistakes and how bad and serious they were. But if I can use the positive aspects that I learned to do some good, then I think that's a big one. But I'm going to do my best to go behind the scenes and really share what the motivations were and why I went wrong and just how badly I went wrong. And hopefully there's value that comes from that, whether it's bringing on interesting people to talk about to really pull out the true kind of desires and motivations and intentions, or just telling stories that are wild and entertaining. I think we can accomplish a lot and share a lot while just being, totally transparent about what happened and why it happened, and then also using this as a way to share what those next steps are and what those next plans are and to track the progress. You let down so many people. What do you say to people who would just call you a con man?
Billy
Serial
McFarland.
However I tried to justify it at the time or shortly after that or for the period after that, it's wrong and it doesn't matter. And there's just no way to say I was wrong. And I hope now that I can in some small way make a positive impact through bringing people together on this podcast and everything else my close friends and team and I have been working on.
Once you knew that Fyre Fest wasn't going to go as promised, why didn't you call it off then?
So I think the first thing that needs to be said is I was guilty, and there's absolutely no way around that. I lied to people. I lied to investors. I lied to sponsors. And the lies were around this idea that I had where I needed to raise more money, or I thought I needed to raise more money to execute the festival. I did everything I could to try to pull that festival off. Looking back, there were thousands of management decisions I made that were totally wrong and totally incorrect that, of course, contributed to the failure. But at the end of the day, I lied to a lot of people who were supporting me and were supporting the vision, and that's inexcusable. But for the actual event, I legitimately tried and thought up until it was canceled that we were going to pull it off. And I think there are so many stories to tell, whether it's the fact that I think we had 30 artists, and 27 of the 30 artists were fully paid, and the other 3 were paid for the first weekend. Or whether the fact that we actually canceled the event, or I canceled the event on site when I was told that 3 people had died in these elaborate stories, and thank God no one was actually hurt in any way, but that's what ultimately led to the cancellation. So there's a lot to get into, but I think before it's appropriate to get into exactly what happened or why it happened, I was guilty and would be in jail and should be in jail, even if the festival was exactly as I promoted it to be. So I think it's really, really important to understand where it went wrong and how bad that was.
They told you people died. What was that all about? I mean, from what I understand, nobody even got hurt or died, so that wasn't an issue. I think the biggest sort of health concern was somebody passing out in an airport lounge before their flight home or something like that.
So there was a Twitter account reporting that 3 people died. They're saying 2 got shot, and as crazy as it sounds, that someone got bit by one of the swimming pigs and died. And that was being reposted and retweeted, and I was getting calls from you name an investor, advisor, reporter kind of asking about the 3 people who had died, and I just said, okay, enough is enough. If people are dying, I literally can't handle this. cancel it, turn the planes around. We literally had planes in the air from Miami bringing our guests, and we turned them around in the middle of the air and brought it back to Miami and tried to get everybody out there as soon as possible.
So before you got the notification, the fake notification that people had died from pig bites and gunshots, you saw a lot of problems. I mean, you even said, I believe this is from the Hulu documentary, that every day we'd wake up to an issue, we'd solve it, and there'd be another one, which is, by the way, any business that is throwing any kind of event or doing any project runs into issues like that, and you're playing whack-a-mole, right? That's literally every entrepreneurial endeavor ever. At what point did you realize that there was a problem that you could not solve?
When I heard people had died. So the festival was scheduled to take place between Thursday and Sunday, and guests started flying in early on a Thursday morning. And the previous night, a big storm came through. And in the midst of the storm, one of the employees took a truck out and ran over a water line, which essentially cut water from all of our bathrooms and shower stalls that we had in the festival site. So when guests were arriving, I made a decision, which I think was one of the biggest ones that led to the cancellation of the festival, which was to send people off-site to a nearby restaurant, bar, and dock area where they could spend the day on the beach and with boats. So we sent all of our boats and jet skis over there. We made it free food and open bars for everybody and kept them there for the whole day while we tried to repair our water system. And by the time they came back, it was getting dark. A lot of the guests were drunk, and we just couldn't control the situation, and it became a madhouse. And I think that uncontrollable situation led to those rumors of people dying, et cetera, and then I canceled the festival at that time. So I think that there were plenty of immoral and dishonest moves that I made prior to, which of course caused everything not to work. But the day of management decision to send people away to try to improve it at the last moment, I think put it over the edge. And I had been doing events for years with Magnesis, and I was so used to, at that point, people running to me with these problems and said, we can't do it, we can't proceed for X, Y, and Z reason. And every time we figured out a way to pull off the event and make it worthwhile. So I was kind of in this mode where every problem was surmountable. And I definitely didn't realize how difficult it was to essentially build a city out of nothing in 5 or 6 months. And this stems from a larger overall problem and a lot of management decisions I made leading up to it, which I'm excited to talk through, both from telling the real story standpoint and from a, intellectual standpoint of talking through it and learning from all the mistakes. And we'll get there. But up until the last second, I believed incorrectly we could pull it off, and obviously I was wrong. But that said, that was rooted in a lot of his, ill-advised decisions I made before that. In terms of handling problems, I think on a personal level, I handled bad news really weirdly. I shut down for 30 seconds when receiving the news and kind of feel like the world was over, but then convinced myself pretty quickly that all of a sudden this bad news can actually be used as a positive and to turn it into a good thing. And I think that's really good in a lot of situations, but it's also really bad in a lot of situations where I feel like no matter how bad things are or maybe how bad the path I was going down, that could actually make a positive out of that. And so that's something I've grappled with and thought through a lot. But at the end of the day, nothing, overcomes the fact that people's well-being were rooted in the decisions I was making. And beyond the lies to investors, even on the decisions where I thought I was doing the right thing for the company, I needed to be more mature and thoughtful about how I handled them.
Take me again through the last few days before the festival when things were just not shaping up as advertised. You'd said you had villas, but I think one of the complaints was there's no villas, there's none of showers, there's none of toilets. You've got people flying in. Tell me how is it that you had villas when the site we see in the documentaries, it looks like, it's a vacant construction site?
So addressing the villas first, there was a festival site which had X number of hundreds of tents, which we spent a little over $1 million on the tents, plus furniture, plus, mattresses, plus everything else. Then outside of that, we had the cruise ship plus a couple hundred villas all over Great Exuma. And as we got into a little bit before, we had literally villa rental street teams, and their entire job for the months leading up to the festival was to go to every single villa or large house they could find on the island and try to rent it. So we would take families, give them money to send them on vacation and rent their house for 2 weeks. And we did this in hundreds and hundreds of instances. And it came down to my poor management, the weeks leading up to and days of the event, which ruined everything. And it's completely my fault. But the team certainly was executing everything to try to make it happen. But then there were also, like, as questions arose, we kept having small wins along the way. Like, oh, we need more housing. Oh, shit, we just found this empty cruise ship, like, on 2 days' notice. What are the odds? Boom, cruise ship arrives, people get excited. Then the stage goes up, and the stage was fucking awesome. We got a really, really high-quality stage. They're blasting the music, they're playing the lights, and all of a sudden it feels really real. So along the way, all these great little wins did happen, but then it essentially just covered up for the poor management I had overall, which, overrode all the good things that were being done.
I'm just, from a perspective of somebody who's never thrown more than a child's birthday party, though, it seems, I get you that the whole story hasn't been told, but it's like, okay, we rented out these villas. They're not there. The festival's in 48 hours. What am I going to do? Should I cancel this or should I wait till people get there? And it seems like the decision was, well, when people get here, I'll fix it. But how? Like, what was your plan?
So the villa story definitely has a lot more to it. We took a map of the island of Great Exuma, where the festival is supposed to take place, and divided it into sections, and sent these street teams literally knocking on doors to every possible villa or condo or house they could find. And the street team consisted of basically a negotiator with cash, someone with a camera to take pictures, and then like a linens team to figure out what we needed to do to spruce those villas up. And for a period of 4 to 6 weeks before the festival, we went and actually rented over 200 separate villas and houses and literally took physical possession of these keys. We had these keys in this cardboard box and an Excel, like a printed out Excel document outlining the address of each house and who was supposed to stay in that house. We then had a separate team who went to the airport, and they were supposed to meet the guests as they got off the plane, give them the keys to the villa, give them their address, and help them get into a car, basically a local taxi driver, to get to those houses. The head of that, villa team disappeared with the box of keys in the Excel document somewhere on the second or third flight of the arriving guests. So once again, I definitely could have put the team in a better position to succeed there, and it comes down to me. But we had certainly put in the time, effort, and funding to secure the villas.
What happened to the keys? Where did they ever turn up?
So I know some of the, I don't know what happened to the box of keys, but I know some of the guests found their way to the villas, and many of them stayed there for the full week, and I'm hoping we can get some of them on to tell their story. But once again, I don't know the total number of guests assigned or whatever it was, but I do have copies of the Excel document, and we did rent over 200 villas for the festival.
When running out of funds, you decide to make the event cashless, so people have to preload wristbands with thousands of dollars. So now you've got another influx of cash from the attendees outside of the ticket prices. I'm sure you've reflected on this since, now that you're behind bars, but I mean, if you were running something that was any sort of regular business, you would have been well suited to that. I mean, this is exactly what a lot of entrepreneurs who are flying by the seat of their pants do. It's just you took some steps over the line.
So to address the wristbands, the plan months and months before the actual building came to fruition was to have the actual event cashless. We were planning on doing the festival on an island called Norman's Key. There is barely sewage, let alone banks or ATMs, so there's no way having people, use ATMs or machines to draw cash was reasonable. The timing of the wristbands was certainly announced to help with our cash flow, but that concept, existed far before that. So in terms of going wrong, it's been tough when I reflect, and I find that so much all the bad took away a lot of the good that was done in the years before it, and I feel like I had so many things that looking back I was proud of but didn't see through because I got lost along the way, and that really hurts. That the opportunity to actually do the right thing and to help other people and to help everybody win was there, and it was just completely thrown away by this string and path that I went down to try to execute the Fyre Festival. I hope there's another opportunity, but the federal jail system obviously is no joke. So it's hard to know what's going to happen. But I think just studying the thought process behind all the bad decisions and why they happened, and learning myself and stopping myself from ever getting to a point where I even consider making one of them has been probably the most valuable part of this process. And now it's about living that and executing it.
Is there anything you would say to the people who work day and night on the event, especially there are people in the Bahamas, a lot of them were wiped out by this, right? As we saw, I know you haven't seen the documentaries, but a lot of those people, most of them never got paid. Some of them had to front their own money to pay for workers or food. What would you say to those people?
I have a couple of close friends who remain in the Bahamas, and I've spent a lot of time talking to them to understand the damage of who was hurt and what really happened. One of our most critical team members in the Bahamas actually died of a heart attack like 6 months ago, and he had put a lot in the line to make the event a success, and I feel completely indebted to him. And that news just, it crushed me for a while, and it's kind of like, as much as I can talk about, making plans or trying to make amends, it needs to go so much deeper with that, and I don't think I have the answers right now other than I'm sorry, and I feel the pain, and I'm living with the pain. And I don't know if it can ever be made up for, but I'll certainly try. And a lot of people tried really hard, whether they're Bahamians or people on our U.S. team, and they believed in it. And I don't think I appreciated trust enough. I was young and took it for granted, this idea of trust, where people just put their blind trust into me, and I took it too far and I ran too far. And sitting on the other side of the coin now from jail, where trust is really like life or death. Trust is everything in jail. And realizing that I was the one who violated trust for thousands of people, and now I'm asking for others to trust and really needing others to trust, kind of a fucked up situation and really brings to light like what actually happened.
Did you knowingly con the investors to get their backing?
To raise money, I lied to my...
This call is from a federal prison.
I knowingly lied to them to raise money for the festival, yes. And that's what the crime was. The crime was just, inexcusably lying about the status of our company to get money I thought I needed for the festival. It got to a point where we were running these cargo barges almost like 2 weekly between Fort Lauderdale and Great Exuma. And I believe our last barge got there Tuesday, and the first guests were scheduled to arrive on Thursday. But we still needed to bring over more mattresses and more materials, so we started chartering cargo planes that would take a container and fly it from the U.S. to the Bahamas, and then we'd truck that container over to the festival site. And, finally, we couldn't wait for mattresses to get shipped from China, so we literally went on Amazon and bought $1 million of mattresses, had them shipped to Fort Lauderdale, and brought those over on the boat and the planes. So we were doing everything right up to the last minute, and should I have seen that things weren't going well? Absolutely. More importantly, was I committing fraud to my investors and partners? Yes, and that's a big issue. But the attempt and the effort was to put everything I had, which I believe the statements show, and to try to make this thing work.
Do you remember a specific point in time where you felt like you weren't telling the truth, or did it sneak up on you?
I think how I justified... There's a big, I think, misconception that I'm in jail for the Fyre Festival, and that's not true. If the Fyre Festival succeeded, I still should have gone to jail. What I did was inflate our company's numbers, how much money we had, how much money we were making, in order to raise overall money. So even if the event was a massive success, I still committed the same crime. So I think it's important to outline that. And after setting the festival date and just moving too fast and kind of without thought, I tried to justify to myself, well, everybody has access to my bank accounts. Everybody has this. Everybody has that. They all know what's going on. And so just give us more money. We're going to make this happen. We all know what's happening. And I tried to justify what I was doing because I thought that everybody knows. But in reality, everybody didn't understand, what was going on in my head. And it's the only way I'm interested in moving forward is I'm going to work just as hard and try to be just as creative and take all the good from it and follow the good themes, but just be so transparent, down to every dollar, every decision. And I think that there's just, that way you can't lose. If everybody knows exactly what's going on every day, whether you win or lose, you've won because people are fighting for a common goal with complete understanding. And I didn't get the power and really just importance to life of that before.
I've seen some of the bank statements. It's clear that you were scrambling to make something happen. From what I'm seeing, It's not like the money was just sitting in a bank account in the Cayman Islands waiting for you. I mean, you were spending a lot on the event. I'm getting a little stressed out just looking at all the money going in and out of these accounts, and I can imagine how you felt spending $450,000, $5.4 million in a matter of weeks just to get, like you said, mattresses. I can only imagine what some of these things are. Flight support for $150K. I mean, there's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of outgoing charges here.
I believe flight support was like a travel consulting thing. I'm not really sure, but we spent, for example, we spent $1.8 million chartering 2 737s, and we literally set up a terminal in Miami International Airport, and those planes are supposed to run Thursday through Monday all day long between Miami and Great Exuma for 2 weekends, shuttling guests. And that was actually one bright spot, which did work out well, and they were super supportive, and we had to send everybody back in the midair, but a lot of those things were good service providers at the end of the day, so I don't want to have blame on these service providers who did a good job, and at the end of the day, it's my fault.
I've seen when I've done other, I guess you'd call it investigative reporting, to put a very fancy spin on looking at a PDF, or a lot of PDFs. When I look at other scams, they just look different. I'm not saying that this didn't turn into something that it wasn't meant to be, but it's clear from what I'm looking at right now that this wasn't all empty promises. Bad management, yes, but it's hard to look at this and say, oh, he never planned on having a festival on this island at that time. I can't really come to that conclusion. It would be impossible. But it also, you were dealing with some pretty high-flying folks looking at the names on these statements. I mean, you are obviously very convincing and well-connected.
So I just want to make one statement there. A lot of people who were supporting, I took their trust, lied to them, and violated that. And I want them to know how seriously I take that. And for everybody else, it doesn't matter, who may or may not have lost money or who was involved. Just simply lying about our numbers to get more money to spend it, whether I thought it was right or wrong, that's fucked up. And I deserve to be where I am. I know I've learned, and I hope for a chance, but it's going to be a long road to get there. I just want to acknowledge that no matter how different the picture may be as to what's been portrayed, the underlying crime is bad, and there's no getting around that.
What happened to the $2 million worth of booze that you shipped to the island? We never heard about the booze.
A lot of the stuff was locked up there and seized, and I just don't know the status of it.
The documentaries would have us believe that all the artists and laborers, suppliers never got paid at all. I can tell that that's not true by the bank statements. And I know that you're not in a position to do so now, but if you could go to the Bahamas, what would you say to the people there who work to build the festival grounds, suppliers, vendors, etc.?
I love the Bahamian culture, and I love the Bahamian people, and I'm close with so many of them. I want to go and give them all a hug and be there and apologize and, try to get through this together. So thank you guys, and I'm sorry, and I hope you can see that, and I hope we can do some good both for you and your culture, because I love it there, and there's some amazing people. Some of the victims,
Some of the people at Fyre Media, for example, spent $250,000 on a company, Amex. It looks like your partner's kind of got stuck with that tab. He's being sued by Amex. Another guy from the company got stuck with a $150K Amex bill. Did it ever go kind of through your head that maybe you'd never be able to pay those people back yourself? I'm sure you intended to originally, and that they would actually be paying off this debt for longer than your prison sentence.
Kind of at a loss of words for the responsibility I think that I've burdened a lot of people with, and the team and people I work with are certainly amongst them. So there's definitely no excuse for that. And we had this system. We called it probably the 2 or 3 months prior to the festival taking place. We had what we called an urgent daily payment sheet, where the team would kind of put together this Google Doc, and every morning I'd wake up to the dozen or so people that we had to pay that day. If we didn't pay them, the festival wouldn't work. And it could range from small money to millions and millions of dollars in a day. And I would just wake up, at 8 a.m. and have until the banks close or the wires close at 4 p.m. to get the money and then make the payments, or else we were totally screwed. And kept doing it and kept doing it and kept doing it, and then made a lot of lies to start getting that money in, and was just in this mindset where the numbers just became irrelevant, and it was like a one track, or whatever it takes, I'm going to figure out how to raise this money and pay these vendors so we can build this thing. And then not realizing the whole time that people were understanding people were putting themselves out there, but not comprehending the magnitude to which they were doing it. And I think that's a really, really important lesson, is if you're putting someone else in a position where they need to step outside their comfort zone, then you need to own that responsibility to make sure you can save them when the time comes. And I wasn't able to, quote, save them, and that's what's really fucked up.
Have you spoken with them at all?
I've spoken with some members of the team, and I think the concept of now being in jail for, 27 months, I'm really surprised by who I speak with, and also surprised by who I don't speak with. And I think there are a lot of lessons and topics to go through there and to be learned. But at the end of the day, people who I really cared about, I burdened them with responsibility that they never should have been exposed to. And yes, some of that is financial, but some of that is family, and some of that is friends who just should never have had to experience the federal prison system or coming to see me in some town in Ohio. It's a shit show, and it's not fair to a lot of people, and that sucks.
A lot of people have said, and even the court documents have said, Billy McFarland is subject to magical thinking. He's prone to magical thinking. What do you think about that? What do you have to say to those people who think that you're thinking too big?
I think it's important to realize that every thing that you see, every great idea, every great product just started as a magical idea in somebody's head. And so everything you need to start that way. Whether it's a really cool building design or a new technology innovation, it started as magical thinking. So I encourage that magical thinking. The issue I had, which is completely inexcusable, is how I went about chasing that dream. I lied, and I made a lot of mistakes and let people down, and that's where my issue starts. But every great creation had to start as a magical idea, so that was not the problem.
How have you been misunderstood? Have you at all been misunderstood? Where do you think the media and the public have gotten something wrong about you?
I was dead set on trying to share everything new that I thought I was experiencing or discovering. Whether it was Magnesis or the Fyre Festival, I thought I was, finding new things in New York City that I wanted to share through Magnesis, or finding these small islands, the Bahamas, that I wanted to share with everybody I knew. And it was just a desire to take what I thought was new and different that for some reason I stumbled upon and let as many people see that as possible. It was never about, the money. I spent every last dollar I had, which is in the bank statements, up until the last second, trying to make this dream a reality. My personal gain was trying to make everybody happy, and I went afoul trying to make that happen. But I wanted nothing more than people to experience the magic of these little islands that happened when all these different people came in and shared adventure and shared new experiences with each other.
What about Ja Rule? Are you guys on good terms? If you've looked at some of the media or even on social media, some of that was him kind of throwing you under the bus. What happened there?
I think he has a lot of talent, and I hope for all the best for him. But at this point, I just think the steps that need to be taken are towards helping those that were hurt.
Do you think Ja was hurt, or do you think he was complicit?
At the end of the day, the buck starts and ends with me. I was in charge. I made the decisions, and so in terms of things going wrong, the responsibility was fully mine.
I mean, look, it was a little bit of a weird beginning, right? We had sort of like the prep statement. I am curious. The statement, the first call, was that something that you were reading, or is that something that's been going through your head for 2 years as you've been, in various forms or another, as you've been incarcerated?
I still think I don't know how to apologize. I've tried writing people letters. I've spoken to them on the phone, and rightfully so, everything has mixed results. Some people were saying, why didn't you call me earlier? And some people were saying, we're not ready to hear from you. So it's just kind of been this thought process where I know what I'm sorry for. I know what I want to say. I just don't know when or how it's appropriate. And it's probably a unique situation for every person. And I need to understand that everybody went through something differently, and they handle that differently. And just I guess, being patient with that process and realizing that my apologies probably won't be accepted. And if they do, eventually it'll take years and years and a lot of proper behavior to earn that back and understanding the road that's ahead.
What's your biggest regret, 2020 hindsight?
My biggest regret was lying to people who put their trust in me and not understanding the importance of that trust and how that trust and how that belief went more than just venturing for new ground, and how they expected me to be the last person there to make sure, the ventures and the innovation fell back and was actually delivered as promised. And understanding that, there's really responsibility in all of these dreams and ideas, and they're not just dreams and ideas. To make them real, you need to own that responsibility, and I lost sight of that, and I'm sorry.
What's one thought you want to leave people with today?
Guys, I'm sorry. I fucked up, and I was wrong, and I was guilty. And there's a lot of people who tried really hard to make this work, a lot of Bahamians, a lot of my New York team. I'm sorry, guys. I know I don't deserve anything, but I hope to show you over the next couple of years, through actions and through the transparency I'll provide through this podcast, my intentions on making this up to you in some small way. So thank you for believing me. And one time I took advantage for you. It's fucked up. It's not going to happen again. And I'm going to dedicate myself to try to show you how seriously I take this.